I think the first and most important thing is to bear in mind that this is a different audience. Now, with any new market, that's a given, but with China, it's not just a translation issue. So just translating your website isn't going to be sufficient. You need to be thinking about new customers, different browsing habits, different buying habits, and do your research. That's the first thing. Before doing anything, do your research. And the second most important thing is your Chinese name. Don't just presume that whatever name you have that might work in the US or Europe or Germany is going to work in China. It could have a connotation that is not appropriate. It could be perceived as rude. Take advice, take very good advice on a Chinese name and secure the domain names well ahead of doing any marketing. That's a kind of a key point, because if you don't do that, you'll find 6 months down the line, when you've got real traction in China, somebody will sell you that domain name for a rather lot of money. So make sure you secure all the domain names, .cns, that are relevant to that name or misspells of that name, and that's probably the second most important thing you can do. And that's not something that is just for large companies or small companies, that's for everybody. So you must have a .cn, and it must make sense and have the right connotations for what you're trying to achieve in China. The third thing and most important thing is to think social. Chinese culture naturally is very social. It's all about word of mouth. It's all about referrals. So whatever presence you have, you must have, even if it's basic landing pages, but preferably a website or microsite that has been designed and developed for the Chinese market that you can then integrate with your social platforms. Sounds complicated, but it's not. Just don't think Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, they don't exist in China, they're banned. You need to think differently. You need to think, okay, different social platforms, and I need to design a website for the Chinese audience. And I would say that you're better off having 2 pages that have been designed for mobile, for example, in Mandarin, that will integrate with social media platforms in China, than you are an all singing, all dancing website that's translated into Chinese and nobody can find it. So take advice and make sure that you do it properly. And to be honest, you're better off doing something small and properly than doing a very large website that nobody can access. Think, whatever your product is, people need to find out about it. They need to trust it. It's all about trust and credibility in China. So that has got to be top of the list. The other thing, fourth thing, is to think about heritage. The biggest thing that UK companies have in their sort of sales remit is the fact that Chinese audiences and customers love buying English products. Britishness, as I call it. Think English heritage, focus on that with whatever communication you do, whether it be social media, whether it be your website, whether it be TV, radio, it doesn't matter. Think about your English heritage. That's what Chinese audiences are buying into. That's why they travel on planes and come all the way over to Bicester Village, for example, or they go to Harrods, or they go to Fortnum and Mason. They're buying the English dream. And that's the biggest thing that you have over and above your competition in, say, for example, America, Germany, France. So use that. That's a massive, massive sales point. And I would say, finally, know your competition. So whereas you might be trading in Europe and you're thinking about European competition, when you're trading in China, think global competition. So think, well, how do Chinese actually buy your product? What are the local players? And also think, what are the global players? If you are an established company and you have a larger marketing budget, instead of a couple of landing pages, have a website. Have a website where you can then integrate that with Tmall and Taobao and actually sell your products, because just having a couple of branded pages is going to basically be great for credibility, great in order to market who you are, but you can't sell any product that way. If you've got a higher budget, you need to then be thinking about, well, how can I be found on Baidu, China's biggest search engine, 360, which is coming up behind Baidu, so do some search engine marketing. Do some advertising activity and some pretty heavy content activity on social media platforms. So really, you need to start somewhere, no matter how small you are, but the larger you are, get a dedicated agency, get them to put together a bespoke China entry strategy, right the way from research, right the way through to digital deployment, and go from there. But don't think, oh, I'll just replicate what I did in Spain or replicate what I did in the US. It is a completely different market. You need to bear in mind that your Chinese customer is not just buying your product or viewing your projects in China, they're viewing them anywhere in the world. Chinese travel, and they also travel to buy. It's cheaper to buy outside of China. So make sure that your landing pages, your website is accessible in Chinese anywhere in the world. So think about your hosting. So think about the fact that they may view it in Hong Kong, China, US, UK. Be aware that also it's about how you talk to your customer when they engage with you. So they might engage with you online through social media. They might engage with you by picking up the phone. Or actually QQ is very, very common a way to communicate with Chinese online. So it's you know, how may I help you? And you must make sure that if you're thinking about Chinese entry, that you've got Chinese speakers within the company. Pretty obvious. But a lot of companies don't. So somebody's interested in what you've got to do as a company. Somebody picks up the phone or emails you, make sure somebody can respond in Chinese in the way that is the tonality is right for the company, and then they understand the company's services and whatnot. That is a good first step if you haven't got an office or you haven't got a business over in China. But do think about engagement. And then that also corresponds with if you have a bricks and mortar company, a shop for example, and you're accepting Chinese into the UK, think about how they like to be served, how they like to be sold to. It's very, very different to an English customer. So
Great.
Take advice on that, on the
Thank
cultural
you.
aspect. Whereas email marketing, for example, is extremely utilised within the UK as a method of talking to existing customers, customers within China tend to use one of two things. They use something called WeChat, which is now huge. It literally is email in your pocket. There are over 100 million users just outside of China. That's not within China, that's using that as an app, a bit like WhatsApp outside of China. That's a very good way to talk to people, and QQ is something, a module you can put onto a website where your Chinese staff can talk to Chinese customers or prospects through an interface. QQ is a bit like MSN Messenger, and it's a very common form of communication in China. And customers will trust that much more than they would to ring up a phone line, and you need to bear that in mind.